Welcome everyone to the afternoon session, the final session of the day, GIS in Action, session 6. If you're here, you're in the, well, I'm just gonna go ahead and say it, it's probably the best session of the afternoon. We have two great presenters today. We have Jeff Wilkerson up first, and he's gonna talk to us about the Bus Stop Reviewer, the little app that could. I love that title. Jeff comes to us, he is a senior GIS administrator at Valley Metro. He has over 30 years of experience in GIS, working for various public and private companies throughout Arizona. He likes to vacation with his family at national parks and is currently trying to rebuild a 1968 Chevy truck. So if you're interested in that, you can connect with him later, but I'm going to turn it over to him so he can tell us about the little app that could. Over to you, Jeff.
Thanks. Welcome, everybody. This is the last presentation of the conference, so hopefully everybody's still up for this. I'm not the last presenter, though, so Steve will have to bring us all home. But as Jamie said, I'm a senior GIS administrator for Valley Metro. There aren't any junior administrators, but they gave me that title and it stuck since. But today I want to talk to you about of what we're calling the Bus Stop Reviewer application. And it is going to be something that comes out of it, but I'm calling it the little app that could. From here on out, I'm going to go ahead and stop my video so that you can see the full screen. So Valley Metro is the regional transportation, or excuse me, I used to work for ADOT. It's the regional transit agency and the regional transit system in the Phoenix metropolitan area. And on a daily basis, we're involved with bus, light rail, paratransit services throughout the valley. And the group that I specifically work with, the service planning group, is responsible for planning and scheduling of transit services. And one of the things that we really need to keep a handle on is all the transit data that we need to do these planning services. One of the data that we're constantly having to keep updated is the over 7,000 bus stops in the region. And it seems like, well, once you get them into a GIS or a database, it'd be easily maintained after that point. But you throw in the added fact that there's over 19 different member agencies that actually own that those bus stops and maintain that information. Valley Metro doesn't own any bus stops and doesn't maintain any bus stops. We're actually a lot different than pretty much every transit agency throughout the nation in that respect. But bus stops in themselves, they come in all shapes and sizes, and but there are many characteristics that are uniform among them that you could easily convert over to a database structure. Does it have a pad? Does it have lighting? Does it have a bench? How many benches does it have? How many trash cans does it have? Does it have advertising? Things like that. There are occasionally something that pops up that we can't easily identify or maintain. Those what we might call outliers. And this recently did happen in the city of Phoenix. So we do leave the comment section open. So if you want to type in, hauled up dirty mattress to make a sofa out of on top of the bus stop in there, you could easily put that in there. But this brought us into identifying, well, maybe we could put together some kind of bus stop reviewer application. And it could be something that we use to reduce data redundancy and make it easier for us to have that data available whenever we did analysis or modeling purposes. So out of this came the phase 1 of the bus stop reviewer, which is actually the idea of one of our planning technicians. He thought that if we could show all of the member agencies where their bus stops lie and the attributes that they had, something that they could easily query for and show that information and even see what other member agencies are doing, that would be something that they could benefit from, and the region would benefit as a whole because they could make sure that their data is up to date and get it to us as soon as possible. From there, we actually thought, well, maybe a Survey 123 app where they could add new bus stops would be something that would be beneficial as well. And I kind of spoke up and said, well, why don't we just throw together an editor? And so I quickly put together a JavaScript 4X interface with functionality that was out there by Esri Samples, just to show what this might look like and just to get some feedback from people. So our next step after this was to get feedback. And we initially took this to our service planning working group meeting, and all of the member agencies are represented there. And through that meeting, we pretty much got some good feedback. There's a couple agencies that thought it was adding more work than they couldn't even handle at the current time. And at least one agency thought, why are we doing this? You know, there's other ways to spend our time, kind of thing. And you'll find those wherever, but we did have a lot that were interested in, and some that still currently use robust systems to maintain bus stop location and attributes, but thought being part of this program would benefit the whole group as a whole. So they were on board. One of those was the city of Mesa. We reached out to them and sat down and got their detailed attribute information and how they handle bus stops in their current GIS system. This was new to us, at least, you know, from the existing structure. When I got hired at Valley Metro, it's been like this ever since, is just one table of attributes. And when you get down to benches or trash cans or things that you can have many items of, many amenities of at a bus stop, it gets very hard to identify those. And we would just have columns for, we had 5 benches, we had 2 bike racks, we had 3 trash cans, and you can't get specific information about them that way. But using the city of Mesa's structure with related tables, we saw how that could be beneficial. In addition, their extensive use of domain information made it a lot easier for people to maintain specific attributes. There'd always be columns for like comments or specialized things that they could type in. But if we could maintain that for the whole region, we thought, well, this would be something that would certainly benefit everybody. So out of this, we got the idea of coming up with a phase 2 bus stop reviewer. And this might look a lot like phase 1, and that's pretty much because it is. We haven't done anything with the front end interface for phase 2 yet. We've really gotten away from the idea that this is what's driving the whole thing. And really what's driving the whole thing is the ability to edit that data so that everybody's on board with this. What you do with it after you have all the data, whether it's a dashboard or a report or even the new experience builder, that is that can be handled in many different ways. In fact, there's right now a lot of discussion about, should it be public? What should be public? And who could get access to that? So out of that initial study, the initial feedback, we realized the editing piece was the main way to go. And 4 pieces of editing, ways of editing came out of that. The ability to edit one-on-one relationships or the bus stops themselves, the features, the many-to-one relationships or the related attributes. So really what we have are attributes or routes. Each bus stop could have multiple routes. And then bulk editing. How can you handle the ability to export many bus stops? And how can you import many bus stops? And what we ended up going with was Excel, because all of the member agencies we did talk about either use Excel or talked about manipulating data back and forth using Excel. So with that, we came up with the interface here, and is I'm not going live with it for obvious reasons, but I'm going to try to show you how that functionality looks through the slides. what you're first presented with is the login that's comes with identifying any database layer in ArcGIS Online as being internal or organizational only. At Valley Metro, we do have an enterprise license agreement. We have quite a few field editor licenses sitting out there. So those really make good licenses for this purpose. We don't need to allow people to log in, to make maps using that license, which doesn't allow that. So, you know, it's really just accessing this one application. And through that login, we can limit what exactly they're looking at. So I'm logged in as an administrator for Valley Metro. I get to see initially all of the Maricopa County bus stops. But I don't really talk about it, but up there at the top is a floating tool list, and it's made floating by using a Dojo movable library. And it's really easy to make things movable like that. I don't talk about it much, but this whole application is really built using the JavaScript API, one extra library for the Excel stuff called XLSX, and Dojo. Dojo is really still a part of JavaScript 4X, but Esri's trying to move away from it, but it's still in there. So you don't even have to really reference that library again. But that toolbar is made available through that. So you can easily add a new bus stop, but if you select one that's existing, you're presented a pop-up. This is a pop-up that's generated from the application, not one that's built into the layer that exists on ArcGIS Online. And the reason that I call this an interim bus stop, and I'll show you later where it comes from. Esri actually has a sample for it. From here, you can either delete the bus stop directly, or you can go into their editor widget. And the reason why we have that interim is the JavaScript 4X editor widget doesn't allow you to get access to what object you just had selected. Once you selected it and you go into the editor widget, it's basically all contained in there. It's actually an enhancement request I have with Esri right now to expose the object information so that you can get that outside of there. And as we'll see when we get to related tables, we really need to know what that object is, that bus stop ID, that object ID, and the global ID going on with that particular selected point. But using the editor widget will save you a lot of time and allow you to go pretty quickly as far as setting up editing properties. And here's just a little bit of code. I'm going to try this. It's kind of hard to show you all of the code, but here on the left-hand side, you can see just setting up that editor widget, what's involved. There's a little bit more than this. The nice thing is you can set up groupings of all the fields so that the users can easily tab between those. It does have an initial state. That's another thing that's not working with the 4X editor widget right now, is I'm asking for it to be collapsed, and it's not collapsed. So hopefully moving forward, Esri will figure out how to remedy that. And this, as I stated, you know, that interim pop-up that shows up before you get to the editor widget, it actually comes out of this code, this pop-up edit action sample. And there's a lot of information on how to set up that form, which can be interesting in itself. You can set up attachments and pictures and things like that. And what we're doing here is we're trapping what the user is clicking on when they click on the view, when they click on the map. I'm using the immediate click event because the click event actually goes a lot slower. It waits for the double click to see if the next thing is a double click. The next one is a click, so it generates a double click. And the immediate click says, I found a click, I'm going to move forward. But all this is really doing is either highlighting or not highlighting that, and then the pop-up takes care of the rest in the background. If you are trying to add a stop, then it first looks to see if it selected a graphic, and if you didn't, and you selected the plus from the tools, then it will actually just generate a new stop using this as request to the REST URL layer for the bus stops, and just put that stop into the database, and then you can start editing the attributes thereon. When you get to the related tables, those couldn't be built, the editing piece at least, using the JavaScript editor widget, because it only handles feature services. It doesn't handle tables. There is a data table widget, but really to get more control over the whole thing, I went with the Dojo dgrid library. And like I said before, you don't have to reference Dojo again, but you get access to this library just because you're referencing the Esri JavaScript 4x libraries. But through this, you can instantiate a table. And in this instance, I'm using a memory store behind the scenes. So as soon as the user clicks on, I want to see related information, it goes out based upon the stop selected and queries the table to see if there's any related information, and then populates this data store. Whenever you add a new record into that memory store, it's given a negative object ID until you click the save button. The save will actually push it back to ArcGIS Online and generate a record that gets a true object ID. And then that comes back to the memory store with that. But you can get a better handle on things like the drop downs using the domains that you've generated in the code. And the Dojo dgrid does have a nice widget for determining the date. That's another issue with the JavaScript API editor widget right now, is the date formatter for date fields is not popping up. So users have to type it in. I keep updating to the next version, see if they'll fix it, but they're still waiting for them out there. So if you generate multiple records, again, once you save them, you see here, you'll have positive values in the object ID. Those are saved back into ArcGIS Online. Anything with a negative value has not been saved. And if you click save, it'll generate new ones. But if you click cancel, it basically just goes back to ArcGIS Online, gets whatever data is in there, and then repopulates the memory store. I imagine the ArcGIS editor widget uses the memory store like this in the background, or a similar memory store, to maintain that information while it's operating. And the same thing happens with the related route information. It's just a different table. Relating information in ArcGIS Online, there's just one thing you need to understand. When you're adding new related data, you need to utilize the global ID for the feature, the feature record that you're going to be relating that data to. So inside of the bus stop reviewer, when the user clicks on save and there's new related data, it needs to go out, and the first thing is select the bus stop ID and get that global ID from that bus stop ID. And then it goes and performs the update, or in this case, the addition to the related table using that global ID. You see it's the same global ID when the amenities are added. But when it gets to ArcGIS Online, it says, okay, those are being added back to this particular record. And if you go into ArcGIS Online and you look at that feature layer and you go to the data table and you look over to the right-hand side, you can see if there's any relations there. They'll actually show you the number of records that are related in the related table. And you can click on those and see actual values of what's related. Again, a little bit more code. I don't know how this comes out, but it's trying to get you a little bit more in depth. So this is actually a function that is useful for many different things, a couple different things. And this is only for related tables, but it's allows you to do exactly what we were just talking about. There's actually a first step here that determines if there's, using the global ID for the related records, if there's any that already exist in ArcGIS Online. Because if they are, you don't want to add them back again. You want to basically do an update process. And then doing what we were just talking about, you need to query for the bus stop in question and get the bus stop ID from that, and then use that in the creation of any new features, and either for updates or ads, updates or ads, you need to generate the JSON that's going to be used in the process. And then I have another function for pushing that out. The main thing that I just wanted to point out about this particular function, parse related, is that it works on a table. What I tried in the initial process was doing this on a record by record basis, which works great if you're editing table 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 at a time. But we are using this also for the bulk processing of Excel spreadsheets. And when you're uploading 7,000 records, the REST endpoint to ArcGIS Online gets overloaded quite easily. So this is actually doing a chunking, and I can't remember what that's set at right now, but that's the main process. When you get to the bulk processing, the export process is relatively simple. It's using the XLSX library, as I stated before. But the first thing it's doing is reading the REST endpoint for the records in question. So if you're logged in as a specific jurisdiction, you're only getting your jurisdiction's records. Those are put into lists, JavaScript list, and then those are just exported out using this XLSX library. And you can't see it. I probably should have shown the bottom of the Excel spreadsheet, but it's publishing it with a worksheet for the points, a worksheet for the related amenities and the related routes. And the import process, again, using the XLSX is a little bit more complicated because you need to know what are we trying to do with this record you're uploading. So even if there's 7,000 records, we have this extra field called edit type in there, U for update, A for add, and D for delete, so that any jurisdiction or member agency could download the data that they want to work with and make multiple changes to it using Excel spreadsheet and then upload it that way. So you don't have to do a manipulation, one at a time. And then finally, we did have to add one more thing. We call it the administration tool. Right now, City of Phoenix is the only one that can generate a true bus stop ID, and the bus stop reviewer generates a new one with a negative value, just so that we can get it in there and we can start relating tables. But through this interface, the City of Phoenix can log in with their administrative password and see if there's any bus stops that have a negative bus stop ID, make the chain, and then the main purpose here is it goes through the related tables and updates the bus stops at the same time. So when we got through this whole process, we looked at this, why are we doing this again? And we saw, yeah, the bus stop reviewer is a good opportunity to reduce extra effort and increase data accuracy. But the bus stop reviewers it seems to be more than that. It's also a tool that brings together everybody that are in pursuit of the common goal. Well, it's just bus stops in this sense, but it's one tool that we don't really have across anywhere else with all the member agencies, where they can all focus on being together on generating this for the whole agency. And so that's why I'm calling it the little app that could, because it brings our focus down to the level that we can all agree on. Something that's really needed and really was pointed out to us by a couple of the member agencies when we went out and started working with them. So that's a lesson learned about it being, bringing things to regional focus. Here's some more. I always have a hard time with lessons learned. It's probably because I seem to always have to relearn them. But here's a few. One of the first ones, interacting with ArcGIS Online can be slow, and you kind of expect that it's online, but it's surprisingly fast at times, and then you do the same thing and it's slow. So I'm always trying to figure out what's going on there and why it's doing things different. Don't over design your code, just make it work and clean it up. I'm always struggling with this as well, because I can easily start trying to fix it before I just, make things all work together. Of course, software is never finished, and this is my fault for a lot of things. If you open up your mouth, expect to back up whatever comes out, because they're all relying on me to do what I said. This wasn't really my lesson learned. Don't assume you don't know what's best for your customer. It was really the planner who started this whole thing, thought we would develop this, everybody would love it, and be implemented by Christmas. You know how that goes. And I've seen this quite a bit, so I knew there would probably be some political things going on. But overall, it's really starting to open up some doors. City of Phoenix is starting to work with us, and they've been a big hole as far as getting information about their bus stops in the past. So, looking forward, I think we're on the right track, and actually looking for phase 3 coming down the road. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Wow, that was great. And okay, there's a couple questions coming in, so I won't waste time saying how great you are.
I'm trying to turn on my video. Okay.
Oops.
All right.
Might be getting a little feedback, so I'm not sure there. I'll try to relay these questions to you. First question, could you have created the same functionality with the current AGOL Survey 123 functionality without custom programming, especially the one-to-many relationships?
With the current ArcGIS Online, what functionality?
And Survey 123?
I don't think it would be as involved. And Survey 123, you're limited with basically doing creates or adds. The main reason we went this route is we thought there's going to be a lot more functionality coming out of this down the road, and we want to have a handle. Like, we do have this relationship set up, but we don't really do much with it. We've started looking at the experience builder for maybe phase 3, and it may actually be limiting us. Right now, the only thing that's maintaining this whole relationship is the bus stop reviewer. But it just seemed like, when we met with all the jurisdictions, and specifically City of Mesa, that was something that they felt was necessary. So we've kept that relationship there. I don't think Survey 123 would have been as robust for us for what we're trying to do. And the main goal of this interface, keep it as easy as possible so that people use it.
Okay, great. We have 1 minute left, so I think we have time for this last little question here. Who are the predominant users of the published application? Is this mainly for your operations facilities management? Perhaps an opportunity to also incorporate a related table for tasks or work orders?
This is primarily for the member agencies, and the member agencies each have a transit group or a transit person. Some agencies have one person who maintain all their transit information with spreadsheets. Others, like City of Mesa, have a very robust one with multiple people, and they know GIS. So it's many different levels of knowledge of GIS, many different levels of number of people using it. We have people who use a spreadsheet who are really excited about using this because it's a lot more functionality that they have. And then there's those that use a spreadsheet who say, I don't have time to hardly do the spreadsheet I have now. So, but the first user is actually us. We wanted to make it as easy to use. So if we use it, maybe we can get others on board, kind of thing. And there's other processes with City of Phoenix as far as getting the information bus stops, routes, and time schedules out to the GTFS. It runs through a whole series of steps, and GTFS is actually what Google is using. If you go to Google and say, when's the next bus coming? It's using GTFS tables.
Okay, great. Well, if more questions come in, maybe perhaps we can type them in, but I've also put you have your email addresses on the screen if people want to email you directly, and I've also put it into the chat if people need to connect with you there. Thanks, Jeff. That was great. And we're hoping the conference committee might get in touch with you about doing a more you're on the conference committee. So we might get with you to do a more in-depth technical session next year, because this was great stuff. Thank you. All right, so next up, we have someone who probably does not need an introduction, Steve Whitney, who's not just my co-chair here for the AGIC Conference Committee, but he's also the GIS manager for Pima County GIS. He's been an AGIC chair in 2020, and of course, he's also the Arizona Professional Land Surveyors Geospatial Committee chair. And Steve is going to talk to us about GIS Web Service metadata, and I'm just gonna turn it over to you, Steve.
Great, thanks, Jamie. Just give me a second. I'm gonna bring up, I just gotta bring up the chat so I can see when I'm getting down on time. Welcome everybody to one of the very last sessions of this conference. And what better way to close it out by talking about metadata, right? So some of you may have heard me talk about metadata in the past. This one's a little twist. We here at Pima County have developed metadata for our GIS Web Services. So this is going to be conceptual in terms of, I'm not going to go into the nuts and bolts of how we did this, because we have a longtime staff member who's been with us for decades, and he's a cold fusion guru. So most of this was done through cold fusion, but really conceptually to get you to think about developing metadata for your GIS web services. So in Pima County, we developed our own in-house metadata back in the 90s. So, and we continue to use it. So it doesn't follow any standard necessarily, but we've added a lot of functionality over the years. And so web service metadata is just one of those additional functions and enhancements that we have made to our metadata. So so we're going to use our GIS parcel layer as the example today. And this is the metadata page for that layer, or part of it at least. And then at the very bottom, there's a link for ArcGIS/GeoCortex service layers. This is for internal use only, so external users will not see this part. We use this internally to get information about where all this particular layer is being used in a web service. And so you see that we've got ArcGIS/GeoCortex because our Pima map system is based on GeoCortex. So a lot of our GIS layers are consumed by Pima maps and other systems, as we'll take a look at here. So basically, when you click on this, the link that says for service layers found, it will take you to this page. And on the left side, this is a listing of all the ArcGIS server systems we have implemented here at the county. And so this layer can show up on any one of those, and it can show up multiple times in one. Pima Maps here is an example, has a count of 2. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And then on the right side is just another way to view the metadata and the different formats that we present this metadata in, and the different types of information that we provide for the web services. And so we are going to use the open data the metadata for the open data site is an example. Going forward, we'll circle back on some Pima map stuff as well. So basically, clicking on the show link for open data takes you to this page. So now this is kind of the basic entry level metadata for this web service. It has a link back to the primary metadata. It has ArcGIS server links at different levels within the REST endpoint. And then the ArcGIS service path link takes you to the service's full list of layers included, because for many of our web services, we have multiple layers published within each service. So this is the root level of the service's REST endpoint, pretty basic. If you're familiar with the way web services are published through ArcGIS server, this will be familiar to you. So this shows us the folder for the open data. And then this shows the service level of the service's REST endpoint. So this is the service that this layer participates in, is published in. So you'll see all the other layers that are included in this service as well. And then you can either click on the layer here, or if you recall back, we had the root service and layer metadata links. So this takes you to the actual REST endpoint for this specific layer, and then you can explore the various information about that layer as it's published through the service, if that's what you're looking for. So sorry, forgetting to read my notes. So this is the another view of the full list of layers included in the service with the pertinent details for each layer. That might be a little small for you to see, but it gives us some pretty pertinent information about all the layers in this service. Looking at the parcel layer, again, you'll see that root service and layer link as well. It also gives you the ArcGIS service path. So you can see the service structure, the way the service is structured within the REST endpoint, the layer number, which can be important to this as well. So backing up a bit, we're going to explore the Pima Maps system, because it's it's the one that has a count of 2, and that coincides with the right side where I've got the alternate boxed in as well, because within our Pima Map system, this layer is published twice. Once at the top here is the primary service. The second one is the alternate service. So the second use of this layer within Pima Maps is for a scale-dependent view within a different service. It also has a definition query applied to it, and then comments saying how this alternate layer differs. It's due to the scale range, but then also notice that we also provide GeoCortex links at this level, because GeoCortex uses a REST, and it looks very similar to ArcGIS Server through ArcGIS Server Manager. It's got a REST endpoint look and feel to it within GeoCortex, so there can be additional information about how this particular layer is used within GeoCortex and our Pima Maps system. It gives a little bit of information here, specific to GeoCortex. This is the ArcGIS the ArcGIS service layer name. So instead of just parcels, it's parcels Pima at a 75K scale. It gives the ArcGIS service path within GeoCortex, land records, parcel group, internal. So you know how it's structured within GeoCortex and Pima maps. You get the same type of information below in terms of the GeoCortex service site name, which is land records internal source, which may be familiar if you're a GeoCortex user, the type of how that is structured. And then looking at this alternate layer a little more, you've got, it shows it's, points out it's an alternate layer. You've got, again, the typical ArcGIS server links of, the root service and layer. You've got the service path. You've actually got the definition query here in this view as well. And then again, you've got those GeoCortex links that differ a little bit. Instead of root service and layer, it's map group and layer. But again, as I said, it has the same kind of look and feel as an ArcGIS server REST endpoint. So, what are the benefits? What are the pros and cons of doing web service level metadata? It basically shows where a given layer is being published as a web service throughout the enterprise. So here in Pima County, I'm just going to back up. I got time. So back to this list of all the systems, you can see that we have an awful lot of systems here implemented in the county, and this layer could be published on any one of those systems. So currently we have it at least documented on 3 systems. I'm pretty sure it's on more and just hasn't been documented. You'll notice we have Acela as our permit management system. IPS is the Infor, or formerly known as Hansen. That's an asset management system used by our wastewater department. Maximo is an asset management system used by our Department of Transportation. So for these 3 business systems, we set up a dedicated ArcGIS server environment for each one. So that's dedicated servers, dedicated ArcGIS server instances, and dedicated web services published from those servers to support those systems. And the reason we do that is so if we dink around with the services or change them for Pima maps, it's not going to affect any of these other systems. And then sometimes these other systems can be version locked. They only support a certain version of ArcGIS server. So we don't have to worry about that anymore too. Yes, lots of extra overhead managing those services and those web services published for those services. And that's one of the main reasons we wanted to put this metadata together, so we could track where all a given layer is used throughout the enterprise. And this is especially valuable if you're going to make a change to the data. You can see what downstream effects it's going to have and explore those and determine what you need to do to make sure that any changes you make to the schema, definition query, things like that, how you need to adjust for within the other systems before that gets pushed out. Again, I kind of covered this. It provides the ability to focus on the apps that are consuming a given layer. And it can also provide info or triggers for data processing jobs. And we use that here. That's another reason we wanted to set this up, so we can determine on a nightly basis which layers need to be updated and within which apps or systems we need to push those updates and changes out to. drawbacks of web service metadata. You have to do it. Metadata is typically towards the bottom of everybody's to-do list. So you got to do it. You also got to keep it up to date. So we initially did a big push to get all of our web services documented within this system. And now we do a quarterly reminder to everybody to please go back and review the web service metadata for layers that they are familiar with or responsible or published within the systems that they manage, to keep it all up to date, keep it humming along. So with that, I'm ready for any questions we might have. And I ripped through that pretty quick. But again, this was more conceptual in terms of getting you to think about producing web service level metadata within your organization. If you may find that helpful, I think it's very helpful within large organizations like we have here at Pima County, and we support a ton of different systems within many different departments, and also through our both internal and external web mapping systems and ArcGIS portal and ArcGIS Online. So it really helps us keep track of where all those layers are being used and published via web services.
Okay, there is a question, Steve. That was, you did go through that pretty quick, but.
Well, I figure, end of the day, people want to get to the socials and such.
Okay, well, let's get to this question here. Let's see if I can phrase this. I'm typing into the chat here too, but does your method parse upstream each service layer's manifest to learn which enterprise feature classes are being consumed or referenced?
Upstream, method parse upstream. I believe so. I mean, I didn't show you all the different views into reference. So yes, I mean that's the other nice thing, and I think this is getting at your question. The other nice thing about having this system in place is we can do reports just like that to get a full listing of all the layers that are being published through web services, which would include all the different business systems and applications, like I mentioned, business systems, applications like Portal and ArcGIS Online and our Pima map system. So yes, we can get at that information through queries against this metadata because it's all in SQL tables on the back end. That's where all this metadata lives. And so yes, we can get at that through reports and queries on the back end.
Okay, we have a comment in here, and then I have a question. The comment actually says, "Great work, nice to see good documentation like this." But my question is, how do you use how do you make sure that this gets done? Do you use some sort of project management thing? Do you quarterly, annually, or do you just put it in a process? I mean, everybody hates, like you said, everybody hates to do metadata.
Right.
How do you make sure it gets updated and checked and all that?
Right. So we use Team Foundation Server for project management, and that might seem a little strange because Team, it's a Microsoft product, and Team Foundation Server is typically used for script and code management and software development. But it's also got a component to it that you can use for project management, Kanban boards. So we have this level, we have metadata in there as a project, as an ongoing project. And so we we operate within an agile framework. And so we have quarterly planning and then 2-week sprints. So every quarter we have in there update web service metadata as well as update GIS layer metadata. So that's how we manage it from a project management standpoint, and remind people to go back and look at their metadata and make any updates that are needed.
Okay. Well, that's great. That's always the hardest part, seems to me.
I was going to say we use whips and chains, but we're not quite that masochistic.
Okay, well, there's no more questions. There wasn't one more comment in there that says, I love how much information you can pull from this. It is an amazing system.
Yeah, it's kind of a routine we've fallen into, or we have a lot of people that have been here for 30+ years, and we basically figured out that the end users want it in any format you can give it to them, and there's never such a thing as too much information. So as you may have noticed, there was a lot of different ways to get at this information and a lot of different ways to get different views of it. And that's just kind of built into our thinking. It's kind of part of our culture, I guess, that, and really the person, John Dickinson, who some of you may know, who developed this for us, sometimes we wonder if we go a little overboard, but we figure, well, again, too much information is not necessarily a bad thing. So we provide lots of different ways to get at it, lots of different ways to view it. And so it gives people the choice on how deep they want to dive into that rabbit hole and get at the information.
Wonderful. All right. Well, I didn't see any more questions come in, so I guess we might just let people head off to the hospitality suite or to the local meetups.
Yeah, let's do it.
If before you jump off, please remember to fill out the feedback survey, everyone, with the button on the right side. And hopefully we'll see you at one of the user group meetings tomorrow. And thanks for coming to the conference, and have a great night.